Hello, my name's Judy Jeans, and today I'd like to show you some different ideas that I've been working on during lockdown for hand-tied bouquets. For those of you that have seen me demonstrate before, you will know that when I've done a hand-tied, I've explained that I've not been particularly good at keeping it all neat and tidy in my hand, and then when I go to tie it, it all falls apart, or if I put it down. So I was practicing with the chicken wire, the very large mesh chicken wire, using the Susie Edwards constant spray method. And that is to get a piece of chicken wire about that size, fold the tops down in like an envelope corner, then into a handbag style, and you sort of just make a very loose roll, sort of ending up with like a pillowcase, which is very good to put into vases for flowers if you don't want to use any floral foam, but it has also got its uses for hand-tied bouquets. However, I have found that it has got some limitations. Some plants don't like touching the wire, particularly their stems, and you can't afford to put a flower in and it gets cut by the wire. Some wires, some flowers, like the very large stemmed sunflowers, can be quite difficult to put through the wire as well. So, as I say, during lockdown I've been practicing with some different forms and frameworks, and for today's demonstration I just wanted to show you one or two methods that I've been using with. So I've taken 8 of the stub wires, the gregor wires as we call them, and bound them in the waxy stem tape, and you need 8 of those, and when they're all covered, this is the full length of the stub wire, but I also only tend to use 2/3 for some of the smaller bouquets. But when they're all covered, you then get your stem tape, go about halfway up and bind the bottom 8 tightly together. And when you've done that, you'll end up with your spider's web, looking a little bit like this. This is actually the shorter stub wires that I've used, taken a wreath ring and just bent the ends of the spider's web over to secure it. And you end up with a very nice and firm framework in which you can put your tied bouquet. But then what I've done with the one I'm going to be using today is I've covered it with a slightly smaller gauge chicken wire, so that I have got some support for my flowers when I put them in. As I say, I've been practicing through this dreaded lockdown with lots of different variations of the same theme, and I'll show you in a second demonstration some more variations. So for today's demonstration, I'm just using a collection of foliage and flowers mainly from my garden. Storm Mullen and Storm Fred have really battered my lovely perennial phloxes and other flowers that I just wanted to use today, but the storm has put paid to it. So what I have done is I have some sunflowers, just one bunch from our local cheaper supermarket. I've got some, what's left over of my Agapanthus, and again very battered by the storm, so a lot of the petals have fallen off, but you have these very interesting forms that are left, which a little splash of purple there to use. I have a collection of grasses, again from the garden. I do apologise, I don't know their names, because this one in particular I planted 2 years ago, only to realise that it wasn't probably a perennial grass, and it died down last year and never grew again, and then this year it sprouted, so that's good. I have some Solidago, the goldenrod, a little bit more yellow. I have the seed heads left over from my gorgeous tall red Lucifer crocosmias, which gives a lovely different texture for this particular bouquet, and a collection of my garden ferns that were here when we bought the bungalow about 21 years ago. And there's some really lovely curly ones to add a little bit of extra interest to the bouquet. So, using my framework, I'm going to put through the ferns, and I need to turn it as I put them through, because this still does create that traditional spiral effect. And why I particularly like these frameworks for doing tied bouquets is if something is you want to move something, it's not quite in the right place, you can take it out, put it back in, and the whole bouquet doesn't fall apart. And you can see I'm already starting to create that spiral underneath. So yes, lockdown has been very, very strange for us all, but it has given a lot of us the chance to have a little practice with our flower arranging skills. What I also particularly enjoyed is watching all the video demonstrations that people have so generously done to keep us occupied during our enforced lockdown. And one in particular that I'm afraid I have watched every single demonstration she has done is the lovely Francine from New Zealand. But that's not to say we haven't got amazing demonstrators in this country who have also very, very kindly been demonstrating for us and sharing with everyone. And in some ways I do hope that continues when we can return to normal, whatever that new normal will look like. But for those of us whose clubs are not meeting again until the new year, hopefully these demonstrations will give you some ideas and some inspiration to be going on with. So there we have just a framework of my garden ferns. And then I am going to put the sunflowers in next, because these do have particularly large stems, and I do want to make sure that I can get them in without any damage to them. And as I say, the beauty of this type of framework is that you can move them around if you're not happy with their first position. But I'm just placing them around the outside, twisting as I go. And then I think I'm going to have one just straight in the middle there. I'll put the Agapanthus in next, again, so that they are positioned around the bouquet. Just adds another texture and form here to the arrangement, and just a little hint of purple as well. And then next I'm going to put the solidago in, the goldenrod, which seems this year to have gone absolutely wild in my garden and spreading everywhere. But I was talking to a friend who owns a nursery quite close by to us, and he was saying he can't buy goldenrod plants, so I've been digging some up for him. He said they were his mum's favourite flower, and he was quite sad that he couldn't get any more. So if anybody wants any goldenrod, we have plenty in our garden. Then I'll put these really interesting crocosmia seeds in. This type of bouquet does give you a much looser bouquet, which does tend to be favoured now by brides. My own niece, who sadly has had to postpone her wedding twice this year, has asked me to make a hand tie using wildflowers, and she wants it very loose. She doesn't want it tight like the traditional bouquets. But as I say, you can move your plant material around without it falling apart. Pull that one up slightly. Put one more bit of crocosmia there, I think. And that does give a lovely, loose looking bouquet. Just put a few of these grasses in again, just to add another wild looking form to my bouquet. And you can see underneath I've carried on and I've got my spiral. I said one of the jobs I wanted to do in lockdown was to go around my garden and name all the plants. I don't know what's happened, but time has gone on and I haven't quite achieved that yet. The lady who we bought the bungalow from, when we were looking around, went around the garden and she named all her plants and where she got them from on all her travels around the world and parties she'd attended where she had been given arrangements from the centre of wedding tables. Really interesting stories she would tell us, and I should have at the time made a note of what she was saying, but perhaps one day. So there we have the hand tied, and you can see it's very loose looking. Some of the sunflowers, because of their weight, have dropped down and you can just move them around slightly. But as I said earlier, the beauty of this is you can put it down and it's not going to go anywhere. So I have a piece of string here, the paper covered wire string, which I can just secure my bouquet together. And then to complete the country look, I will tie it up with raffia. I often use the raffia, but Hessian works just as well. And if you want ribbons to coordinate the colour of the flowers, then that's fine too. But I'm just going to take the raffia and make a loose bow. And then you can just trim off the ends. If you do want it to stand up in cellophane, but for today's I'm just going to put it, although it is standing, you can wrap this in the cellophane, but for today I'm going to put it into a vase of water. very loose looking country bouquet, ideal to give as a present or indeed for many other occasions. So thank you very much for watching that, and I will show you some different variations of hand ties in following this one. Thank you very much. For my second hand tie, I'd just like to show you some different variations of the same thing that I've been playing around with during lockdown. Again, following some ideas that I've seen on internet demonstrations, mainly done by the lovely Francine in New Zealand during lockdown. So again, I've taken the 8 Gregor wires, the stub wires. These are a little bit shorter than in my first hand tied. And again, I've put the wreath ring on and bent the wires over. Now you can, of course, cover the stub wires and the wreath ring in lots of different things, string and wool. I've got one here that I've done earlier in wool, which would make a lovely framework for an autumnal hand tied, or indeed any other colour, and you can use lots of different things to go on top. Now what I have managed to get hold of are some of these very cheap felt mats that you can get from the pound stores. You tend to get them mainly in reds and silvers and golds at Christmas, which would make lovely Christmassy arrangements. But I've got some green ones, and again, using the same framework as I did earlier, but instead of the chicken wire, this time I'm putting on a felt table mat. And there's one I've got here that I've done earlier. Just put that one out of the way. And I've literally just caught it in a few places with some matching green wire so that you can't see it. I have also been looking at not using the stub wires because obviously during lockdown we've not been able to get to the wholesalers. And all I have done is with a lower bowl, I've just taken the table mat and wired it to the ring. I've used a smaller one here that sits quite nicely in the top of a glass bowl. And again, you can put stones in here or some fabric or some little fairy lights. Some of the bottle lights would look nice as well. Again, for a centre table arrangement. But as I say, I'm going to do a hand tied. One other hand tie that I have used before but is a lot more ornate and quite time consuming to make, again, is with the Gregor wires. There's only 4 here being used, onto the metal wreath ring, and then all the circles are millilino made into circles and tied together with some green wire. I put a few beads on for extra decoration. But again, you can do this in any colour and then put your flowers in. But when you've gone to so much trouble to make the ring, you don't want to put too many flowers in, otherwise you won't see all your handiwork. But again, just another thing that I've sort of been playing with recently. So, go back to the one that I am going to use today, and that is just a simple hand-tied framework that I've been using before, as I say, and I'm going to be putting literally a ring of roses around. One thing I did treat myself to during lockdown, and it would have been handy to have used in my first demonstration with the ferns, because the fronds can be quite hard on your hands, is a leaf stripper. And apparently the red one is the best one to get, and you literally just, particularly good for roses that have got thorns on, and you literally just strip down the leaves and they all come off without hurting your hands. So there we have it. Okay, so we've got the wreath ring underneath here, and that's literally just where I'm going to be placing my flowers, because you do want to see some of the felt mat afterwards. Otherwise, if you cover it all up, there'd be no point in using it. So I'm literally just got a couple of bunches of roses, which I thought would be lovely. They're the limey green creamy ones, just from my local cheap supermarket. And I'm just going to go round, putting them round the edge, twisting as I go round so that you can see I'm still using that traditional method of making a hand tie. Put them fairly close together. I've got quite a few here that I can use. I was hoping to use flowers from the garden, but the wind has really damaged most of my lovely perennial flowers, like my phloxes that I was hoping to use. But this would look nice with Geminis, freesias, one of my favourite flowers. And all the time turning it to create that spiral effect. So this is just 2 bunches of the £2 roses. So you don't need to have expensive flowers. Should have taken a few more leaves off of that one to create a lovely display. Oops. And there we have a very simple yet very effective hand-tied bouquet. Now you can, if you want to, and I've left a bit of a space there to show you, you can put a little bit of foliage in if you wanted to make a trailing bouquet. And for this I've just used some ivy. And then just to sort of link it across, just to put a little bit more in on the other side, otherwise it does look a little bit strange. But again, you can still see most of the table mat. In fact, that poor little rose there is just hiding, so I'll just pull him out slightly. Perhaps take away a few of the leaves surrounding it. And there we have very quick and easy to make bouquet. So just to tie it up with some string that I had prepared earlier. And again, the beauty of having a framework is you can lay it down and you know that the flowers aren't going to move while you're tying it up and cutting it off. So just to cut the stems off, and then this one can be used quite nicely in a vase. I've got a slightly smaller vase than I would normally use, but it's to leave it on an angle so that you can see the arrangement. So I hope you've enjoyed those different hand ties, and really you just need to have a go at experimenting with the different frameworks. These are lovely to use, the felt mats, but I have seen some raffia mats that you can use as well. And of course you can use lace, you can bind lots of wool or lots of wire over them, and you can use them too. I have got some of the Holly Chapel cages that are also quite good to use. They are plastic, they can be reused, but I much prefer the more natural looking arrangements in some of the wires and the felt mats. So thank you very much for looking at those hand bouquets today. As I say, I hope you've enjoyed them, and hopefully see you all again soon. Thank you, bye bye.